Well, today marks Dissociative Identity Disorder Awareness Day. The day is used to create awareness about D.I.D, which was originally known as multiple personality disorder. D.I.D is a medical condition where those affected have memory loss, out-of-body experiences, detachment from emotions, and a lack of self-identity. For more on this, we are joined via Zoom by clinical psychologist Dr. Saths Cooper. Dr. Cooper, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about D.I.D then. I mean, you know, in the past, many would say that this is something that people who want to get away from their wrongs would use as a weapon to say, you know, they have multiple personalities. And so my one personality might have committed a crime while the other one is innocent. Let's talk further on what actually is D.I.D and if it is in actual fact something that people can use as, you know, some sort of an excuse.
Oh, yes, people can use this as an excuse because they want to deflect from whatever they've done. And this often happens in criminal matters where one claims amnesia as a dissociation, and one claims I'm hearing voices from this other person in me who coexists with my own personality. So the good news is that it's very rare. It is an extremely rare condition, although if you follow some of the practitioners in our capital city, you'll feel as if Afrikaners as a group have a higher percentage of dissociative identity disorder than is usual. Sometimes I think we need to be very wary of this diagnosis occurring so commonly because it is very, very unusual. It is less than 1% by far in the United States, where it was identified and can exist from early childhood because of trauma and related issues that the individual is blocking out. And so in our country, it's very rare.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we should be too bothered about those. But the symptoms, you get a distorted sense of yourself. There's a sense of unreality. Right now, with COVID on its wane and with load shedding, many of us may feel this dissociation.
Yeah.
But it's also the inability to cope with quite a few issues. And as I say, this intrusion of another personality in your life.
Yeah, and you know, you say it as a rare condition, but let's talk about how often, you know, in criminal matters, you know, perhaps would-be criminals would try to use it in their defense. Do you see that happening quite often? I don't know if you're looking at case law and you know what the defense uses, but would you say this is something that they try to use quite often?
I think that criminal defendants will try to use this because if they can succeed in convincing a court that it wasn't I, but it was Flo Ledwaba in my mind telling me to do these kinds of things. Yeah. But usually it relates to another person who is like yourself, almost an alter ego, if you like, that intrudes in your thoughts. But there's stringent tests. There's a lot of issues that the practitioner needs to consider before reaching this diagnosis. And when you reach the diagnosis, you also need to ensure that the individual is not shamming. And there are many ways that a qualified and experienced medical practitioner, a psychiatrist, or a clinical psychologist can find out if you are shamming.
Yeah.
And therefore, that won't be, you won't be able to rely on that as a defense at all, because the practitioner, while assessing you or evaluating you, has to be an expert to the court, not for one side or the other, whether it's the prosecution or whether it's the defense.
Yeah, and do you think that there's enough education about this disorder? I mean, you and I having the conversation, and I mean, even my own preconceived ideas of what multiple personality disorder is were wrong. So I wonder if this is something that a lot of people are actually getting educated on or about.
Well, if a person is acting strangely about their circumstances, there's a serious disconnect with reality. That means that something is happening. It may not mean dissociative identity disorder, but it may mean some very serious psychiatric condition that one is facing. And therefore, one needs to be referred to a qualified practitioner who can rule out whether it's a dissociative amnesic disorder or it's a depersonalization where you feel that out of touch with the reality. And you're observing your actions from a different place. A dissociative identity disorder correctly is characterized by switching from my identity to somebody else. Yeah. And there may be one or sometimes more persons living inside one's head, and you may feel you are overtaken or indeed possessed by other identities. Now, this is something that often ends up in our traditional cultures with persons being regarded as special, and they may be sent to a school where traditional healing may become apparent. So one needs to be very, very careful that Ukutuasa is not confused with another personality that is taking over your thoughts, your actions, and your feelings. And therefore, it requires a qualified practitioner to do this. But when you see movies, you see things on television where people rely on it, and usually in the American context, let's not confuse it with what we can experience here.
All right, Dr. Saths Cooper, we appreciate you always giving us your time here on SABC News. Thank you so much.